Hi there. Today I will be discussing the second of 6 lectures given by Leonard Bernstein at Harvard called The Unanswered Question. Leonard Bernstein delivered the first lecture on October 9, 1973 at the Harvard Square Theatre in Cambridge. He named these lectures The Unanswered Question after a tone poem by Charles Ives. Although the whole project took only 6 weeks, with 1 lecture per week, Humphrey Burton expresses that Bernstein devoted more than a year of his life to these lectures. Bernstein was very well prepared for the tedious routines of rehearsal, lecture, and telecast that created this wonderful series of lectures. In this presentation, I'll be covering Bernstein's second lecture called Musical Syntax. In this lecture, Bernstein explores the relationship between music and linguistics. He believes that this relationship can create a medium through which musicians can speak to non-professional music lovers about music without using the technical jargon that only classically trained musicians would understand. This lecture is broken down into 2 parts. In part 1, Bernstein explains his hypothesis, breaking down the relationship between music and language from its chosen elements all the way up to its supersurface structure. And in part 2, he tests this hypothesis using the first 21 measures of the first movement of Mozart's Symphony No. 40 in G minor. Bernstein begins the lecture citing the well-known linguist Noam Chomsky's work and ideas in linguistic competence or universal grammar. Basically, Chomsky believed that people from all around the world have an innate language faculty, regardless of what language they speak. Chomsky was more interested in the similarities between languages than in their differences. Bernstein also defines syntax, which is the study of rules for the formation of sentences and phrases. Bernstein says that we can understand the inner syntactic functions of Mozart or any other music by analogy of similar functions in language. From here, Bernstein creates this chart with music on the left and language on the right. Note equals phoneme, or minimal sound unit. Motive equals morpheme, or meaningful sound unit. Phrase equals word. Section equals clause. Movement equals sentence. And piece equals an entire piece. However, he points out some fallacies in this chart, noting that a phrase can't always be equated to a word because phrases are linked together by cadences, and are therefore ongoing. However, Bernstein does support the notion of sentence equals movement because of this principle of music that is ongoing, as a cadence is connected to the material that follows it. Although it is totally crazy to think of the whole first movement of Mozart's G minor symphony as just one sentence, Bernstein believes it's not a coincidence that the German word Satz means both sentence and symphonic movement. Next, Bernstein creates further analogies between music and grammar through the use of nouns, adjectives, and verbs. Musical motives can be thought of as nouns. Chords or harmonic entities can be thought of as adjectives that give the nouns descriptive colorations, such as major, minor, diminished, augmented, and so forth and so on. And rhythms can be equated to verbs, such as 3/4 waltzes or arpeggio accompaniments like in Chopin nocturnes. Bernstein supports these ideas using the Fate theme from Wagner's Ring Cycle to illustrate each, and in the end, he creates a Cruel Fate waltz to show the use of all 3 at once. At this point, Bernstein discusses transformational grammar, a Chomskyan idea that every sentence has a surface level and a deep level. He analyzes the sentence, Jack loves Jill, and other variations of this, such as Jill is loved by Jack, does Jack love Jill, and Jack does not love Jill, and others, and he finds that although they have different surface levels, they all have the same deep level, Jill loved Jack. This is an important point that Bernstein applies to music, using a simple E-flat major triad to represent the deep level, Jack loves Jill, and then modifies it several ways to create different surface levels, as you can see here. He then furthers this idea for a while, defining other rules such as deletion, embedding, and pronominalization, analyzing how other sentences evolve from the deep level to the surface level. At this point, he defines language used for a communicative function as being prose, and language used for an aesthetic purpose as being poetry. And poetry, such as the sonnets of Shakespeare, is equivalent to music. From here, Bernstein creates another chart to illustrate his point of multi-level surfaces. The bottom level A is chosen elements, In language, these are basic units of information from phonemes to words. In music, these are pitches, tonalities, scales, chords, meter, and tempo. Level B is the deep structure. In language, this is underlying strings such as Jack Love Jill, and in music, these are combinations of motives and phrases, chord progressions, and rhythmic figures. Level C in language is the surface structure, or prose. However, there isn't really musical prose because music serves an aesthetic purpose only. So for this chart, raw materials that aren't quite music yet, such as the hand and piano exercises, are considered musical prose. And finally, we get to level D, the supersurface or aesthetic level, which is poetry in language and a complete piece in music. In part 2 of the lecture, Bernstein tests the strength of his chart using the first movement of Mozart's Symphony No. 40 in G minor. He begins at the bottom of the ladder, level A, considering the raw materials that Mozart has chosen. The G minor scale and its association with uneasiness, its tonic, dominant, and related triads, as well as its relative major. Bernstein also considers the tempo, allegro molto, the meter, 2 beats to a bar, as well as instrumentation. He proceeds to level B, where melodic, harmonic, and rhythmic combinations create the underlying strings. One of these is the motoric alternation of minor thirds and major sixths in the accompaniment, which acts as both a verb rhythmically and an adjective harmonically. The first bit of the melodic motive here is the noun. Using the symmetrical guide provided by the initial motive, Bernstein creates an extrapolation of the first 21 measures in perfect 4-bar phrases. This version created by Bernstein is considered to be the prose equivalent, which is level C in the chart. Now Bernstein finds his extrapolation to be very repetitive and academic, lacking the necessary deletion to transform it from prosy symmetry to poetic balance. Through the use of deletion, we now arrive at the final version of the movement, level D, giving the piece a sense of strong, weak alternation between down bars and up bars. Bernstein asserts that this is essential for performers and listeners alike. Mozart's use of deletion creates moments of non-symmetricality and thus structural ambiguity. But Bernstein emphasizes that these ambiguities are beautiful and indicative of Mozart's transformation from prosy symmetry to artistry. He concludes this lecture discussing contrapuntal syntax, the combination of all the syntactic transformations of materials happening together, including transpositions, permutations, conjoining, embedding, and augmentation. These are found all over Mozart's G minor symphony and can be derived from music's relationship with linguistics. Overall, I find Bernstein's parallel model comparing music and language to be very compelling and interesting, and he certainly displays a lot of evidence to back it up, but I'm not sure that I totally buy it. I think that this chart is very applicable to the music of Mozart or Beethoven, but I'm not convinced that it can be applied to all music, as Bernstein says in the lecture. What about minimalism? Take clapping music by Steve Reich. It has a meter, it has rhythm, but that's it. Sure, the rhythms change, but only slightly. It's just the same rhythm over and over again, just moved over an eighth note for each cell. No melodic material, no key signature, no tonality at all. Now, as a percussionist, I adore the music of Steve Reich and absolutely view this as a piece of art. But what would Bernstein say about it? Would he defend it using his model? I don't think it would get past level A. And what would he say about 433 by John Cage? In his discussion of the Mozart Symphony, Bernstein talks about G minor as a key that evokes sadness, melancholy, and darkness. I would agree with him, but I think that this statement adds to the list of contradictions he's made with himself about music's meaning. I find his extrapolation of Mozart's G minor symphony similar to his analysis of the Beethoven Fifth sketches from the Joy of Music chapter. Is this really an accurate reenactment of Mozart's intentions, or just a reflection of Bernstein's own compositional processes? Of course, Mozart is long gone, so we can't know for sure. On the positive side, I think Bernstein does a great job of conveying his point and speaking about music in a way that intelligent non-musicians can understand. It's clear that he put a lot of hours into making this production possible, and I think he should be praised for bringing his creative thoughts about music to the public. Thanks for watching this presentation.